Good evening. We'll call the public hearing for Monday, May 12, 2014 to order. Consideration during the public hearing is for zoning amendment bylaw number 3346, 2014. We'll start with reports and correspondence regarding the said zoning amendment bylaw. First up is the city planner's report. Mr. Krekic, if you'd come forward, please. Explain the text of the bylaw and the reason for the public hearing this evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thank you. The intent of this bylaw is densification. The property is located at 521, 523 6th Avenue West. And the context map is attached in your report, and shortly it'll be on the overhead projector. The red circle, red square notes the property in question. And in fact, the bulk of the comments that came in after public notification were about the confusion with respect to the location, because we exist on old surveys. Sometimes the legal surveys are not necessarily that easy to read, and Tatlow and Thurlow often look on maps as same streets, but in fact they are quite a bit different in usage. The applicant has worked diligently for a number of years on this project. In fact, he owns the properties that are next to this property and intends to develop them in a similar fashion, Your Worship. The existing building is quite tired and old, and the proposal is to build it along the lines of the sketches, which are also included in your packages. This, of course, is a black and white rendering, and this would be a color rendering. The black and white rendering denotes this front face. This would be the back face of the building, and these are the side elevation. Following the last meeting, Your Worship, we underwent a public notification process and received, as I said, 3 comments about location, which we answered over the counter. One comment came in, I understand, sometimes today. The question, the query was about the proposed building shadowing the back of the property towards 7th Avenue. After looking at the application, the inquirer was satisfied and mentioned that he may come to the public hearing today. We received only one written notification inquiry, and it was from Mr. Larry Golden, and it reads, while supporting the changes R2 to RM1, I have serious questions which I'll bring at tonight's meeting. They include lot coverage and especially parking. To help both Mr. Golden and the council, lot coverage for RM2 is 50%, and this proposed building covers 46.5%. I'm rounding it up to 45%. Therefore, it passes the test of zoning. And with respect to parking, in your report on page 11, although this copy is now copied numerous times, this question, in fact, was raised in a past, I believe, by Councillor Cunningham about parking requirements and is there enough parking. Our zoning bylaw requires 1 parking place per apartment in multifamily development projects. They have 4 parking places and arguably more than that. Subject to public hearing or requirements for third and final reading is satisfied, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the planner at this time? Councillor Cunningham.
At the moment, he's saying that he's going to be putting 4 apartments in there?
Yes.
It's a rather large building for just 4 apartments, and if you go into the apartment he has next door, what is that zoned at?
That is also zone RM2.
Pardon me?
You'll have to put your mic on, Mr. Krakic.
It's also zone RM2.
And what's the maximum apartments you can have?
You'll have to put the mic on again, Mr. Krakic.
I can tell you in a second. RM2 allows 75 units per net hectare. So basically, it ends up being calculating by the sites. Now, that building that he has next door was there existing prior to adopting of this zoning bylaw. So we've just accepted it as a multifamily development and gave it the zone that applies within the context of the calculation that have to take place.
Because I know even now, I've had people from the Coast Guard stay in the apartment next door, and there's parking's at a premium right around that area right now. And if they put units in there, even 4 apartments with double occupancy, with the type of people that are renting them now, you're going to have 2 vehicles for each unit. I don't know if there's adequate parking right around that area. I've got no problem with the development. Parking's the only concern I have.
I think it's a good point, and it's a good discussion. I think one of the things that we have to consider primarily, following which we can have a conversation, is that for the context of the zoning bylaw, it passes the test. Within a context of the habits that we may find as working population flies in and flies out, drives in and drives out, and having multiple occupancies in an apartment. I think that's one of the things that we are now working through in our planning for major projects initiative, and it's actually quite a serious one. That all said, I think it's also important to note that in Prince Rupert we are hemmed with both topography and the lay of the development, and at times we're just going to have to accept that parking will be quite difficult, and not allowing development without parking is something that always flirts on my desk.
My concern here is you've got another development right in the middle of a residential area, and the residents themselves most have 2 cars. Most of them are off-road parking, but on the other side you have cars parked on the road all the time. Even though in the Black Rooster, is usually full around there, and then if you drive by there at night, the apartment block next to it, all the parking places are full. Now you're going to have even more. And I'm just a little concerned that it's something that people aren't looking at as the parking.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carlick. Pearson.
Thanks.
A little delay there.
Yeah, that's okay. I grew up in that area, and I honestly don't think the parking is an issue around that area. I grew up there well, I don't want to say my age because then you'll know how old I am. But you probably just look on the city website to find out anyways. But there is a lot of extra space around those 2 buildings, the front and the back. So it wouldn't be a concern for me. The parking would not be a concern for me. And a benefit of this new establishment is that it's cleaned up the neighborhood tremendously. When I was growing up, we'd have transients in and out of those houses, but a big portion of 6 West, that block, was a lot of the older people that have retired and moved now, but half of it was really clean, upkept, a part of Little Italy that they had on the west side there, and then the other side was all older, transient people. Since the Black Rooster has come in, that's cleaned up. The facade of the area is really nice. And so now it's like almost every house on there, except for a few, look like they've really done a lot of work to clean up the neighborhood. So it's changed the direction, and I believe that they've only done positive by putting those there.
Thank you. I'll remind councillors that in the public hearing process, you're asked to wait until all the information is in before you speak as to whether you would be of one way or another. That's right in the Local Government Act. Is there any further questions for Mr. Krekic? Thank you very much, Mr. Krekic. So we'll go to the public comment period. I'll read the statement of procedures for public hearings. A public hearing is organized according to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Tonight's public hearing involves the zoning amendment bylaw number 3346/2014. The intent of the bylaw is to rezone 521 and 523 6th Avenue West from R2 two-family residential zone to RM2 multiple family residential zone. Every person present who believes their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in that bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important to restrict your comments to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. A person may make their statement in writing as outlined in the public notice, and if received by the deadline, their presentation will be read by staff at the public hearing. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are observed. This is necessary in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairman will recognize only those individuals who present themselves at the table and speak into the microphone. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read from a prepared statement, the city would appreciate receiving a copy for reference purposes by the corporate administrator. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. Please note that this is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City Council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter. And if no one else comes forward, the public hearing will be adjourned. After the public hearing has adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing. So I'll call for the first time anybody who wishes to come forward to speak to matters contained in the zoning bylaw regarding the property is now welcome to do so. Good evening.
Larry Golden, 1601 2nd Avenue West. Were there any more skill testing questions?
Thank you for 5 minutes, Mr. Golden.
Thank you for the coverage. My main is the parking. So yes, there was a drawing in here where there were 5 parking spaces, but the regulation stipulates 2.7 meters by 5.8 meters must be on the property. So I can see one of those could be there, but then I'm questionable whether the other 3 or 4 meet that criteria without overlapping the property. Personally, I'm quite willing to either accept the $200 in lieu or let them use the front, which wouldn't be relevant to today's bylaws. It'd be on the boulevard, like Black Rooster is, etc. They're using the boulevard to park on. So that's. I also wonder if they aren't encroaching even further with this design, with looking at the roof on the, I don't know if the roof or the foundation is what counts encroachment in the front of the property, but the roof looks to be more covering more area, so therefore it would be covering. But since he said 50%, it would be the encroaching as opposed to the coverage part. If the roof since if it have to, we just did the encroachment, if we have to do a further encroachment for this length of the roof, with it seems to be different. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Krekic, can you offer any information with regards to those comments?
I think I'll be just belaboring the first one with respect to parking. I think that the parking can be provided adequately in the rear of the building. The conversation about about increased traffic in the area, that's what comes with the intensification. With respect to footprint, the coverage is calculated by the foundation footprint, not by the roof footprint.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here this evening who wishes to come forward? I'll call again if there's anybody else who wishes to come forward.
I'm skeptical of Mr. Krekic answered my basic question. Was the parking has to be 2.7 by 5.8 meters long. So yes, you can get 5 parking spaces on there, but they don't meet the rules in there. So it's not that we can get 5 parking spaces on there. It's whether they meet the criteria without overlapping, which he did not answer.
That's fine, Mr. Golden. This is not intended to be a debate. It's intended to get comments from the public. Please come forward, ma'am. Good evening. Thank you for coming down here this evening. Please take your time. You'll have to press the grayish-green button on the microphone. There you go.
Just a side note, my last name has changed. I married the man that we live together now, so I'm here on behalf of the Beals from 510 6th Avenue West.
And your first name?
My first name's Kim.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear him correctly when he said where the parking was going to be. Is it going to be in the front of the building or the back of the building?
Mr. Krekic?
In the rear of the building, in the rear.
Okay, you'll have to press the microphone again. There you go.
So Stan is going to keep a front yard in the building, or is it when he brings it more forward, it's going to take up?
Mr. Krekic, can you answer the question, please?
The building is going to stay exactly where it is. There is a subsequent, and you probably received a letter that also has a development variance permit included inside, which is essentially, as presently exists, the building is encroaching in a front property setback. And generally, when we deal with older buildings, we correct that by giving them a variance permit. So the front of the building is going to stay exactly as it is, and that front yard is going to remain as it is.
Okay, thank you. Not unlike the other little building that's right next to mine that's also sitting on city property and is for sale right now. So we're, from a perspective of whether we're in favor or against it, we're very much in favor of what Stan has done with the property. It's done nothing but, look really good from our perspective. And so people do recognize that the neighborhood is picking up and getting nicer and that. So again, my only concern was just the parking. And one small thing, it's kind of petty, but at times there's been 2 instances in my recollection where the owners of the Black Rooster have not permitted but dissuaded people from parking who were visiting me directly in front of the Black Rooster. They've knocked on their window and said, "You can't park here." That may be an opinion, and if they're willing to paint the curb yellow and pay for distinct parking for Black Rooster, then that's one issue. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a free-for-all. If you get there first, you can park there. And so my young stepdaughter felt very intimidated by Stan and moved her vehicle, even though she was visiting me across the street. So they just need to be reminded, I guess, maybe, that they can't have it all themselves. Unless they're willing to pay for it, then that's fine.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
I'll call again. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward to? I'll call for a second time. If there's anyone who wishes to come forward to express any concerns. And I'll call a third and final time. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward to express how this property rezoning may affect their own? Thank you very much. I'll call this public hearing at an end. I'll direct council to the regular meeting of council agenda for Monday, May the 12th. First consideration is the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda for the regular council meeting of May 12th, 2014 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted. For council's consideration and adoption, there's 5 sets of minutes. The first 4 to be adopted, the 5th to be received. The first set of minutes, the recommendation is that the minutes of the special council meeting of April 1st, 2014 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next for council's consideration are the minutes of the special council meeting of April 22nd, 2014. The recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next are the minutes of the special council meeting of April 23rd, 2014. The recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next for council's consideration are the minutes of the special council meeting of April 28th, 2014. And the recommendation is that they be adopted. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are also adopted. The last set of minutes for adoption are the minutes of the regular council meeting of April 28th, 2014. No, those are to be adopted. The last set, the minutes of the committee. It's been moved that the minutes be adopted. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ashley. Any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. And the last set of minutes to be received are the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of April 28th, 2014. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are also received. Next are the reports and recommendations. There's a report from the Chief Financial Officer. This concerns the 2013 audited financial statements. It comes with a recommendation that Council, by resolution, accept the 2013 audited financial statements. Mrs. Bombin, would you like to outline your request, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. The 2013 financial statements have been audited, and before they can be finalized, the drafts must be approved by Council. Some of the financial highlights of the statements are as follows. There was a $4.1 million increase in cash and cash equivalents over the last year. The main reason for this increase was the $2.1 million interim payment from the Prince Rupert Port Authority. Also, an increase in deferred revenue, mainly gas tax, better collection of taxes receivable over last year, an increase in revenue from sales of services, and an increase in accounts payable. The increase in accounts payable are a result of timing of receiving construction payments prior to year-end. All were paid subsequent to year-end. Landfill closure costs increased to recognize the eventual closing of the in-use cells as per regulation. Debenture debt and leases payable are down from last year as a result of payments made through the year. Tangible capital assets increased mainly due to investments in infrastructure and replacement of needed vehicles and equipment in accordance with the capital budget of last year. Increase in investment in City West as a result of an increase in the subsidiary's net income. The accumulated operating surplus shows all surpluses accumulated throughout the years. These surpluses are earmarked principally for capital expenditures in 2014 and beyond. Bylaw and statutory reserves increased over last year, mainly due to interest earned and an increase in the provision for ferry maintenance. Investment in tangible capital assets is due to the acquisition of capital assets with cash and the value added by way of repayment of debt, and that is why it is higher than last year. Overall, the general fund ended the year with a surplus of $2.25 million, largely due to the interim payment from the Port Authority, as previously mentioned. The water fund ended the year with a slight deficit of $21,000. The sewer fund ended the year with a surplus of $24,000, and the solid waste fund ended the year with a surplus of $318,000, which covers the deficit it had in 2012. To finalize, the auditors provided their management letter stating that the internal controls of the city continue to be strong and that there were no issues that needed to be reported to Mayor and Council. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. It's interesting to note in these statements that the actual on the 2% hotel tax, well, $170,000 was budgeted. It's actually at $223,419. And similarly, the payment from the casino, well, it was budgeted at $400,000, is actually $492,303. So it represents a portion of the increased economic activity in the community. I'll ask Council's consideration of the resolution to accept. Councillor Ashley.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Is there any discussion, any questions of staff? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bombin. Next, we'll move on to bylaws and development variances. For Council's consideration is the zoning amendment bylaw number 3346, 2014. The recommendation is that following the public hearing, Council gives third reading and adopts the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3346, 2014. I'll ask Council's consideration of that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Carlick Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Next for Council's consideration is an application for a development variance permit, and this is for the residents at 521 and 523 6th Avenue West. The recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP-14-07 for 521 and 523 6th Avenue West be approved. I'll ask Council's consideration. Yes.
I just have a question. This is the one on page 63 that has the blueprint, and I was wondering, Your Worship, if just where the parking is going to be. There seemed to be quite a concern about, and I know it's not going to be in the front. I assume that's where the 6th Avenue, that's where the variation is going to be in the front, so that would be 1.18 meters. But is that parking at the back? Is that what Mr. Golden is concerned with?
Mr. Krekic?
Yes, it's in where it's written lane, and that's the backyard, and that would be the parking. And just as a clarification, the numbers that Mr. Golden read are for the straight-in 90-degree parking. Parking can be designed on the angle where the depth can be reduced by the angle itself.
By diagonal parking, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Krekic. Councillor Ashley.
Just another question. I think I know the answer, but just to clarify. So this development variance permit is just simply to take the existing encroachment and make it legal?
Exactly, and only for the front property yard.
I'll ask Council's consideration of the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Garon, seconded by Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Further discussion? Questions have been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. And next, there's an application for a multi-family development variance permit. And this is again for 521 and 523 6th Avenue West. Recommendation is that Council issue the development variance permit number 14-06. I'll ask Council's consideration. Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Garon. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. We're down to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of Council. Councillor Ashley, and then Councillor Thorkelson, then Councillor Kinney.
Just more of an information item, if I could ask staff to look into this. I noticed when flying out last week that the airport website had not been updated, even though the phone number had been, and I was just wondering if we could find out if it is being updated and if we can make sure that that happens, just because there can be some confusion for people that are traveling.
Certainly, thank you. Mr. Long, if you'd look after that, please. Councillor Thorkelson.
Yes, my concern is regarding, again, Brazos, I think the second or third meeting now, the issue of homelessness in our community. And the last meeting I was at, I couldn't attend because I had to fly to Vancouver. I couldn't attend the regular meeting, so I raised in the closed meeting for Council's information that we at the Fisherman's Hall had already had 3 homeless people. That was 2 weeks ago, that come down to the Union Hall that were looking for a place to stay out of the rain, trying to find some place to use a telephone because they couldn't stay at the only men's shelter. They're all men's shelter in town, and there are 6 rooms at Raffles. That's all there are. They're run by the Salvation Army as a hostel, but it just has 6 rooms. When those 6 rooms are full, there are no other hostel rooms in Prince Rupert for men. I assume that's correct. Same for women. And now the issue that I think is important is that we have homelessness in our community now. And we don't even have any development in our community. We don't have Campotex being constructed. We don't have LNG plants being constructed. And we already have homelessness. We've had the Ministry of Housing here twice from BC Housing, and once a representative of the Minister of Housing, and then the other times have been from BC Housing. And they said they suggested that the only way that we can get housing built in Prince Rupert was to find basically a nonprofit organization or an organization that would like to partner with BC Housing, and then there might be money available to help construct new housing. I think that's way too long for us to wait. I'm concerned that BC Housing tore down many of the low-cost housing units in Prince Rupert, and others that they may not have owned have been torn down as well, that used to supply the lower-end rentals in our community. And so now we have Mr. Derwin Gordon, who has not been able to find a place to stay in Prince Rupert, and at a price that he can afford and that meets his wheelchair needs. And so many of us have been donating to the Moby Dick, where he's now staying, to try to keep him off the streets. But you might be able to do that for one person, but you can't do that for many people. And I think that it behooves us as councillors to write a letter to BC Housing and ask them to come to Prince Rupert for another meeting to find out what we can do to ensure that they are increasing the housing in this community, low-cost housing units in this community, both as general rentals and as supportive housing. And what they're going to do about doing that, and doing that now before we have the big influx that we're going to, everybody's hoping to see from the construction then operation of all of the port properties. Your Worship, I'm really concerned because if we don't do anything, then we are going to see our community starting to look like downtown Vancouver. And I don't know if people walk down there, but I've been down there way too much lately. And walking down, Hastings Street or Burrard Street is like walking through a campground. And we don't need to have that in Prince Rupert, and we don't need to run people out of town because they can't find an accommodation here to stay. This fellow has been shipped up to Smithers. He didn't meet the criteria in Smithers, so he got shipped back into Prince Rupert. And there is no place for him to stay because he is unable to find accommodation that is wheelchair accessible. So he can't stay in a place unless there's an elevator, and he can't rent a place unless he can get in and out with his wheelchair. So that limits his abilities in Prince Rupert. So anyway, I'm going to make that motion, but I thought I can see that Mr. Councillor Kinney wants to has something to say on that subject.
Well,
Your Worship.
Certainly, and I'm aware of this. I did get a call. I was able to get an anonymous donation of money for Mr. Gordon, and I heard today from staff that Mr. Gordon, I believe it was staff, now has a place to stay. I can't confirm whether it's a temporary place to stay or something more, but people have been working behind the scenes to accommodate him. But certainly, please go ahead and make a motion. We'll get a seconder. We'll have some more discussion.
Well, Your Worship, then I move that Council write a sternly worded letter to the Ministry of Housing, and as well as to the BC Housing, and as well to CMHC, and to the federal minister responsible for housing, saying that that our community, like many others, but our community needs supportive housing, and that our community has lost its low-cost rental housing during the downturn in our economy, but with the upturn in our economy, we are now seeing needs to provide more low-cost rental housing in our community, and asking for a meeting with those four authorities, a ministry department, and the two CMHC and BC Housing, to again see what they could be doing to create more low-cost housing in our community and supportive housing in our community.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Okay, discussion. Councillor Kinney?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Did I miss, excuse me, Councillor Kinney, did I miss you? No? Okay. Please go ahead.
We found out when we were in Fort St. John, we had an email sent to us that Gordon had found a place. Now Jack has just, or His Worship has just mentioned that. But I did a lot of phoning around about it, and he was accepted at the manor but wouldn't stay. Many places he just would not stay. He left. But he had previous places to go to, but it didn't accept it.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Cunningham.
On that motion, I've noticed that BC Housing, like Councillor Thorkelson just said, it's 70 to 80 units that we've lost in the last few years with BC Housing. It was pointed out to me the other day on McKay and Kootenay alone. And, when they were here talking about it, they said there's programs in that, but I find that they've got a lot of programs down south that seem to get funded, and I don't see any reason why they can't come up here, talk to us, and help us get the funding.
Right. They haven't spoken to us about the current program criteria, but in the past, if you could find a group such as a community service club. And you could get your funding from Canada Mortgage and Housing, supported by the provincial government, and in some cases the municipality would put land in through a 3 or 4 way participation. You would be able to create something. However, it's a good idea to get people here to give us an update on the current programs and have some discussion about what could possibly be done. And we may have ourselves an opportunity to talk to community service clubs or others that may see themselves going forward having an opportunity to support such an entity. Any further discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So having listened to this, I've been thinking about the housing situation as well. And one of the things that strikes me is that it seems like a very limited way of being able to get housing, that you can only get a housing project approved when you have a nonprofit organization that's willing to partner, especially when you have smaller communities like ourselves that have been hard hit and organizations that don't have lots of money, and aging populations where volunteers are down. It makes it very hard to actually take advantage of this type of process. And what I would like to move is that we create a resolution, and I know this is a little bit later, but a resolution for UBCM that asks them to look at a new formula for how BC Housing creates units for local governments, let's say. That allows for more things like partnering, let's say, with the LNG companies and things like that, or that, maybe they actually fund the whole thing themselves, as opposed to asking the community to fund that. And when we already have taxpayer dollars that have been paid to the provincial government to provide some of these things. So I wanted to make that resolution, and I've got a couple other things I wanted to
Certainly.
say.
You're correct. There's some interesting opportunities out there. In other parts of Canada, there's been municipalities where they'll create housing and then they'll sell that housing on their land and then use those funds to create supportive housing. Mm-hmm. So that really it hasn't cost the taxpayers directly any money. Councillor Carlick Pearson was next, and then Councillor Cunningham.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Councillor Kenny, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
No, it's a new subject.
Okay. All right. Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, were you first? Go ahead.
I just wanted to see where staff, where they're at in the Patty Hutchins Memorial.
Let's deal with this motion first. We've got a motion on the floor.
Oh, I thought we closed it. Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Well, no,
Please
I wanted to just mention this because I think it's an important point. We've had our provincial government selling land to LNG companies in the prospect of potential things going on there, and they have received millions of dollars for those properties. And this is something that I see as a need for infrastructure in our town in order to be ready. And the Northwest Readiness Project, which we had Mr. Grant Lackmuth in front of us, said, what do we need? Well, I think this is something that we need, and we should be definitely saying we need this. And you know what? You guys have some money to actually put towards it, and maybe we should get some of that money.
Certainly. I also talked to the provincial government about taking some of that money when they sold their first piece of property for I think it was $21 or $29 million, about putting some of that towards the Tsimshian Access Project. The Northwest Readiness Project, they're in the process of setting an office up in Terrace with personnel that we'll be able to contact directly. Should we deal with this motion? Further discussion on the motion?
Yes, Your Worship. When BC Housing was here, those two young women, and I didn't write down the amount, but they said that they had just been granted an amount from the federal government, I think it was 33 million. The provincial government was going to match it, but I can't quite remember if that was the right amount of money. And but they said that they didn't know which programs that it was going to. It was money that was sitting in waiting for a program to be developed. And I think that this is one of the reasons that we should be striking when the iron's hot now, because if they're going to be developing a program, we should try to ensure that we try to get them to mold the program to meet our interests, and not just mold the program to meet the interests of the Lower Mainland, which also certainly has homelessness issues and housing issues. But I'm sure that's what they're concentrating on, particularly for the next election. And I think that not federal election I'm talking about, and I think that we should be making sure that smaller communities like our own that are that where people live as well need to be able to have that nonprofit housing. And I don't know why BC Housing could build nonprofit housing, tear it down and not replace it. I think that is a question that we asked them before and they didn't answer. But I think we should take that chance to try to mold this funding so that we can use it in our smaller communities.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Next was Councillor Carlick-Pearson. Or was it Councillor Cunningham? No? Please go ahead.
What I was talking about was the Patty Hutchins Memorial. In terms of, we had the staff looking into the unveiling of the field, and there was no correspondence to when that was going to happen. I was just wondering if staff could, if you have any word on that.
I think staff were going to report back to the council on that matter, were they not?
That was over 45 days ago, and this has been ongoing for about 1.5 years now. So, it'd be nice if we could. Yeah, go ahead.
We've actually communicated it already to the gentleman that's in charge of the recreation center at the moment, and so we're waiting to hear back from him. We passed that on just over a week ago.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, please go ahead.
My issue is in the last 48 hours, I've had around 6 people contact me about our friend Pinnacle Pellet. To the point now where it's just getting ridiculous. This so-called poster project of the port has turned into a goddamn nightmare for the residents of the area. They can't enjoy their sun decks. They can't even walk across 2nd Avenue Bridge. The dust is getting worse. You see the top of the silos. The people are being observed up there with hoses washing them down to get rid of the dust. I'm also getting the impression that people are going through the so-called process of contacting the port, and they're getting very, very frustrated with it. What I would like to put forth is a motion that we try and get Pinnacle Pellet to come before council or have a public consultation along with the port and city council to try and get to the bottom of this. It's just getting out of hand, and it's not going to get better. I know some of the people are just frustrated to the point they don't know what to do anymore. And I think as city council members sitting here, we've got to find a way to address this, because it's 1400 Block Atland going up the hill even farther, and it's just like they're ignoring everyone, and we'll just keep doing things the way we want to do it. And I really believe as the city council, we've got to try and get these parties together and get this resolved one way or the other. Okay. I don't know how we can hold them accountable. They seem to think they're above everyone, but it's time we dragged them in here and got them to talk.
Well, our information from the port is that the tenant won't be above anyone, but what I would suggest, if you like, based on what you've just said, because most recently I've been hearing now that there's some odor, and there never was an odor before on top of everything else. But let's, through a motion from yourself, invite Pinnacle Pellet to come and do a presentation to the City Council, and of course it's televised so the public will see it, about their facility there, the concerns that the public have, the residents in that area, and what they're doing to abate them in a timely manner.
Okay, that's a good motion right there.
Okay,
And,
so it's been moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any other comments? Councillor Ashley.
I'm just wondering, along with that, if they might be willing to perhaps entertain some questions from people in the gallery if they were putting a presentation together. I just think it would be a good opportunity for them to answer questions because people maybe don't know what some of the situations are, and it would just be an information kind of gathering session.
Perhaps they could meet with those people privately.
Oh, so as a separate?
Yeah, I'm wondering how we could have somebody here do a presentation and have it go back and forth. That it might be better if they meet privately and certainly express the concerns. Councillor Cunningham.
The other thought what Anna's got is that we can have this as a first step towards a solution, and possibly out of this presentation, if there's no solution to the problem, have them call a public meeting. It's about time they faced up to it themselves. You know, like I know Maynard Angus from the port's been doing as best a job he can, but it must be overwhelming for him too. And a lot of the people just aren't complaining to the port anymore because they're just frustrated. It's, you know, they just don't think there's any resolution to their complaints. And, you know, dust is becoming a problem. And if I spent a few hours reading the EA. They guaranteed dust would not be a problem.
Yeah.
They guaranteed odor wouldn't be a problem. And it's just, you know, that flowery picture with the walkway was the start of it. It just seems it's an abyss. We're going down farther and farther all the time.
Well, I know I've talked to the port also. And I believe the tenant was given 6 months. And I think that 6 month period is around the end of June. And certainly it wouldn't hurt for us to also have some conversations with the port, but we could initially start with the tenant. Your motion looks after that.
Okay.
Councillor Thorkelson.
I do remember, though, that the port was here and promised to have dust monitoring equipment that would be mobile, so it wouldn't just be sitting in one place, but if there was a dust problem on 2nd Avenue, they could put their meter where the person was complaining, or if it was on Atlan, they could move their meter and put it there. But we should be asking the port as well to tell us what they're doing to monitor the dust issue.
Some of the comments from the port are that this facility is going through a commissioning stage and that by the end of that period, everything should be meeting the set criteria which the port has and which they have the equipment to monitor, such as noise and dust. There's been some concerns about some of the noise, that the level of the noise being created does not register with the equipment, but I've actually in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, talked to some of the residents that have had concerns. And, well, the smell happens to be a newer concern. And now we're hearing about dust. Some of them were actually telling me that the noise has been lessened. So I think they're working on it all the time. But certainly, Pinnacle Pellet is a new corporate citizen in the community, and would be good to have them here to get some degree of assurance that they are solving these problems.
Yes, Your Worship, I do understand about the commissioning and that they had to have some time to work out difficulties, but all I was saying is that the port made that commitment, and so the port should be monitoring now so that they can say whether there is a problem or not a problem. And if there is not a problem, then Pinnacle Pellet there's no issue. If there is a problem, and then the port should be notifying Pinnacle Pellet that there is a problem. They have to reduce those, that they have to get rid of the dust emissions. So all I'm suggesting is that the port said they were going to have that equipment, and the port should not be waiting until the project is commissioned before they test the air quality.
Right. Certainly. Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Councillor Ashley.
Just one other thing. I do understand what you were saying about it might be hard to facilitate a question-answer thing in the same type of a presentation. But what I'm wondering, because there are people that have specific concerns, is if we could maybe see if people had specific concerns, they could email us that we could forward to Pinnacle before they did their presentation. That might allow them to address some of those issues.
Certainly, yeah.
And then if we collected those, it just would allow them to kind of, address maybe some things we haven't heard about.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. Thank you. Anything further with regard to the motion? If not, I'll call for the question. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. Councillor Kinney and then Councillor Carlick-Pearson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Rory. Rory, Councillor Cunningham and myself have both asked in the past few months about, is there any possibility of getting some, seeing as that Fraser Street is being pushed to 2015, can we get some holes filled by the senior center for the parking?
Your Worship, as I understand it, there was a plan in place to actually have some of the holes filled. Mr. Pucci with the engineering department had, I believe, in the last council meeting denoted that he was actually going to look after some of the major holes. So that is something that is on the agenda. I'm not sure of the dates as I don't have them directly in front of me, but.
Okay, the matter is at hand. Councillor Carlick-Pearson and then Councillor Cunningham.
Now that the summer season's coming up, there's a lot of RVers and families and people that are really concerned about the Taylor Lake park area. And what I've heard is that it's the jurisdiction of the Port Ed municipal.
Yes, it's in their community, yes.
So a lot of Rupert people are bringing it forth, saying that it's unfair that there's a lot of RVers out there, and that, one of the rebuttals was that these people are keeping the area clean, but as Prince Rupert people, we've already sacrificed all of our waterfront. We have nothing but gates and trains all over the place, and the one of the three areas that we had access to for our kids was Taylor Lake. Now you can't go down there. There's 10 RV sites down there. There's a huge tent there, and so people say, well, there's enough space for everyone, which I'd really like to see if us, because a lot of people from Prince Rupert go out to these areas, if we could look into something, having a meeting with the Prince Rupert or the Port Ed Council to discuss this, because it is a major concern.
Perhaps you'd like to make a motion to Port Ed, and I would say to the province of British Columbia, because we're not sure who has the actual legislation there or the actual regulatory authority. You are correct. It is within the municipal boundaries of the District of Port Ed, but it may in fact be looked after or managed by another entity. But ask that there be no overnight stays there so that the area remains open to everybody. Because I do understand there's people that go out there. If you were to drive out there tonight, you would probably see 3 or 4 trailers that are left there in perpetuity all summer long, which does not afford everybody an opportunity to use the area. So you may want to make a motion suggesting to the District of Port Edward, or to whatever other entity there is that regulates that area, that there be no overnight stays allowed. That way it would stay open for the majority of the people in the District of Port Edward and the City of Prince Rupert to utilize.
So, Your Worship, should we invite the Council of Port Ed to come in and discuss this further, or should we just
we could
a recommendation?
If you made the motion, we could send them a letter and point out that if they needed to discuss it further, it's pretty straightforward. But if they needed to discuss it further, we'd certainly be welcome to do that.
I'll make that motion.
May speed it along. So it's been moved by Councillor Carlick-Pearson and seconded by Councillor Ashley. Discussion with regard to the motion. Councillor?
So my discussion, just an addition to that, is that
Certainly.
There was at one time signs out there, and there are derelict pieces of signs that have been taken down. Not sure by who, but if we could look into that as well. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yes, Councillor Ashley.
Just one further point to that. I think right now it's recreational users, I think, that are are doing that. But I think another thing that's important to maybe look at in sort of long term is that if we do start having more people moving to town and with other things, you could end up with people camping out there and staying out there. And I think that this would be kind of a preemptive way of making sure that that didn't happen.
Certainly, it starts with signage and is followed up with enforcement. Any further discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion's adopted. Is there anything further from members of council? If not, I'll give the mayor's report. I attended the National Aboriginal Business Opportunities Conference, held here for the 4th consecutive year. This year it was held in the Civic Center Gymnasium, Auditorium, and the Arena. There were 420 delegates in attendance, as well as 60 exhibitors at the trade show. On behalf of City Council and residents, I provided a greeting to the participants and also did a presentation on the community. I participated in the first meeting of the city's newly formed Recreation Commission, which is to act as an advisory group to City Council about recreation services in the city and review concerns, suggestions, and ideas from facility users. Also in attendance was Councillor Ashley. I participated in the May 1st Cemetery Day cleanup of headstones on graves at the Fairview Cemetery, where there was a work party of 12 to 14 volunteers. The Cemetery Day is hosted by the Prince Rupert Cemetery Advisory Committee. Out of interest to residents, our biggest single annual event in the city, the All-Native Basketball Tournament, brings $30,000 a year to the recreation complex and $2.5 million to the city. That's each year. I attended the Senior Center Pancake Breakfast for the month of May, which is a fundraiser for the Senior Center, and Councillor Cunningham was also in attendance. I attended the North Central Local Government Association Annual General Meeting in Fort St. John. The North Central area covers 68% of the province of British Columbia. And it goes from the British Columbia-Yukon border in the north and the BC-Alberta border in the east, down to 100 Mile House in the south and out to Haida Gwaii in the west. So we cover 68% of the province, and it's home to 8% of the total population of British Columbia, yet 70% of British Columbia's export incomes come from the north. At this annual general meeting, there were presentations from the Northern Development Initiative Trust, also the Municipal Finance Authority, and the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. There were also workshops about natural gas, and there was a tour of natural gas extraction facilities and sessions to consider resolutions about issues in our area to be forwarded to the Union of BC Municipalities. There were sessions on such things as work camps and the effects they have on communities, also the energy industry and the effect those changes bring. Also in attendance were Councillors Ashley, Garon, and Kinney. On behalf of Councillor Cunningham, I attended the Northwest Regional Hospital District meeting with representatives from the Northern Health Authority, and an update was provided on the new hospital construction at Queen Charlotte City, and there was a request for increased health care service from representatives of the District of Houston, and talk about improvements to the Mills Memorial Hospital and the repair to the floor for the MRI machinery at Prince Rupert Regional Hospital. And I'll also in the near future be meeting with members of the medical community in consideration of attracting yet again more doctors to Prince Rupert. That concludes the report. Mr. Long, have you got anything further? Mr. Mandrick? Mrs. Bombin? No. I'll ask Council for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that this meeting be adjourned. Those in favor? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.